Welcome to Conversation With. This program is spotlighting one person in our community that I've wanted to talk to. And that person in this episode is Blair. Ann is multi-talented, multifaceted, very political, and very, very smart. Ann, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ann retired at the end of 2015.
That's great.
But she's had a fabulous career. We're going to talk about Public Facilities District. We're going to talk about Kitsap County. We're going to talk about Bainbridge Island. We're going to talk about Ann. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about your background.
Okay.
Ann, I'm so glad you are willing. And we are, I need to tell everybody, we're in Bainbridge Island City Hall.
I know, and it's a wonderful, wonderful chamber, isn't it?
Yeah, you love it. I know you do love it. And let's talk about, as we shared off camera, you and I came to Washington State just about the same time. Yourself from Colorado, myself from, well, I was in Southern California at the time. Tell us why you came to Washington and what happened right after
Actually,
that.
as nice as that is, Char, I came long before you. I came to Bainbridge.
Oh, I see, I see.
No, I've got you. My white hair shows.
You're a few years older than I am.
I am, as a matter of fact. But I did come to Kitsap County in 1977. I had come to Seattle area to go to the University of Washington. And then stayed and lived in Seattle after doing some traveling after college, and then moved over here in '77.
In 1977, you came to Bainbridge.
We did, and we moved to an older home. It was built in 1910, and that's where we are to this time.
Wow.
Yep.
Did you raise your family on
We
Bainbridge?
did. We did. Yep. The
And
kids
you-
were 2, 3, and 4 when we moved here.
So your children are 1 year apart.
Well, some of them.
So, so tell us where these kids are now.
All right. Well, our daughter Jessica, who's our oldest, lives in Portland, and our son Christopher and his wife Heidi and their children live here on Bainbridge Island, and our son Jeff and his family live in Denver.
So you get to visit.
They're great spots to go calling.
Right.
They really are, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So, Ann, let's talk about after college and raising your children. You've been involved in some really fabulous organizations. You've been on leadership roles at Seattle Children's Hospital, Olympic College, Leadership Kitsap, Puget Sound Restoration Fund, Kitsap Community Foundation, everything that we're all very knowledgeable about. But in your working career, what was the first job you had?
Actually, you know, it's interesting. The first thing, I guess I taught school for a while and did that. And then when I went back to work as a nonprofit administrator, the first thing I did was I was the executive director for the Washington State Water and Wastewater Districts. So got to learn a whole lot about the water systems and sewage systems and that sort of thing, which was fascinating. And I was really actually, the other thing is I became a registered lobbyist for that association and for those boards. And so I got my first chance to work with the legislature during those years.
So first of all, you were a teacher, then you went into the nonprofit world.
I did. I had been a volunteer and been very involved in taking a lot of training and facilitating courses and so forth.
Let's talk about the Kitsap Public Facilities District. And those of us that are aware of this know, number one, that Safeco Field was built through this funding model. And also numerous things in Kitsap that we'll talk about. But tell us about the Public Facilities District. How did that whole even in Seattle, how did that funding mechanism begin?
Well, it initially started with the recognition that there needed to be some public funding of public facilities. And so there was legislation passed that enabled different counties, or any of the counties in the state, to establish a public facilities district, which would eventually, and no one knew quite what the funding mechanism would be, to utilize funds to build recreational facilities in the state, recreation and conference facilities in a particular region, and they needed to be of regional nature. So that happened, and Kitsap County, the commissioners at the time, established a public facilities district with no money or necessarily anything other than the vague legislative mandate. And then in I think it was probably 1999, the city of Seattle and King County wanted to build a sports stadium, and the voters said no. And then the Mariners began to win. And the legislature said, "Oh yes, we do want a stadium, and you all deserve a stadium," which was a grand idea and absolutely something that's benefited Seattle. But as a funding mechanism, what they had come up with was a 0.1% rebate on the sales tax generated in that particular region, in a county in this particular instance. So that legislation was grand, but every other county in the state said, we want that too.
We want that.
And so that particular funding mechanism became available through legislation, and Kitsap County was ready, was prepared, had a public facilities district, and then had a funding mechanism.
Yeah. Well, we all remember back in, that was 2001, 2002.
Yeah, it was just, and 2002 was the groundbreaking for what became the Kitsap Conference Center in downtown Bremerton, and that was the first project.
That was the very first project, and wow, what a huge impact.
Wasn't it?
Such a huge impact. And do you remember back then, what other projects were on the board that were vying for the PFD funding?
Well, at that point, they did a couple of different things, but one of them, they had a contest, essentially, an RFP, and sought that out. And and I was not involved during the process of the choosing which one of those facilities, but I think there were three, as I understand and recall. I think one of them was at McCormick Woods to put in a conference center and a sporting facility, and then there was one at the fairgrounds, and then there was also the conference center in downtown Bremerton. And downtown Bremerton at that point, really, and at that point, Carrie Bozeman was the mayor, and there was a strong desire to really, really reinvest and reinvigorate downtown Bremerton. So I think that became a regional calling. And the fun part for me, as I then became the executive director of the PFD, was that it was always foretold to be a partnership arrangement. That it wasn't going to be something that the PFD was going to do on its own. It was going to serve as a funding mechanism in partnership with public and private organizations. So that within itself was very different for our county and different from all the other PFDs around the state. But it sure did make it, I mean, it made it challenging, but also really fun.
Really fun. And we all know, those of us that know the Kitsap Conference Center and everything around it, hotels, coffee shops, museums, that all just really spurred.
And the ferry terminal and all of the transit center, transit center.
That's correct. Really spurred the revitalization of downtown Bremerton.
Absolutely did.
Really wonderful. How long were you with the PFD?
I was with them for about 6.5 years.
Yeah.
So we got that project started, and then redid the fairgrounds and the ball fields and not the President's Hall, the pavilion.
Right.
Again, with the idea that it was a regional event center. And then the next one was the North Kitsap Event Center, and put in 10 sports fields there and redid the stadium and so forth. So.
Right. And that money is still coming in. The PFD is still alive, still extremely well. And it's not grant money, it's money that's given. Is that correct?
Well, it's actually, that's exactly right. But there is a small amount of money that the board has set aside to be used each year for grants to support projects that happen in any one of those facilities. Again, it's an economic development mandate. So in addition to that facilities, there was also the idea of an economic stimulus. So.
Yeah, great projects, great catalysts for that. So after the PFD, did you work for the county for a little while?
Then I shifted. I thought I was retiring. That was sort of my first retirement, and I failed that happily, as it turned out, because Steve Bauer invited me to come and work with him in the north end of the county. And then I did that, and I think also did some special projects for the county, and went on to do that. And at the point I thought I would retire from that,
then what happened?
Then I decided and found that there was a position on the Bainbridge City Council that was open. And I, fortunately and happily, but it seemed there was enough discord going on at that point, and trying to figure out, as we changed our form of government, how to work together and how would this new governance system work. And that was fascinating and a challenge. So I said, I'd love to try.
Oh, you're awesome. Tell us about the old form of government on Bainbridge and the new form.
Well, the change was from what is referred to as the strong mayor form of government, in which the mayor is elected as the person who really runs and does the operational work, in cooperation always with the city council, but in fact is the chief executive officer.
Correct.
And the change that our voters made for our council was to shift to a city manager and city council form of government, which meant that the city council would hire a professional city manager who would then run the city, and the council would run the policy and the strategic planning.
What year was that, Ann, that
Oh,
change?
right. Let's see, it must have been 2013, 2012, 2013.
So you were elected to your first term.
I was. I ran for, I served for 4 years, for one term.
One term.
One term. And then
You were
halfway
mayor.
through, I was elected mayor. And that's a difference too. The mayor in the council manager form of government, the council elects the mayor, as opposed to the whole community doing it. So in this case, so the council elected me.
And the mayor is elected every year.
Well, it had been, and then they realized, and we all collectively agreed that I would serve for 2 years, and I think that's become the way we'll approach
Great.
it. When Val Tollefson was elected, it was very definitely with the understanding that it would be a 2-year term.
Lots of changes on Bainbridge Island while Ann served on city council.
We did.
Explosion of population. Changes in services.
Well, it's interesting, and our population has not grown as tremendously. I think certainly over the course of the 20 years of Bainbridge being a city, a self-governing city, there's been huge growth. But in the last few years, since the recession, there hasn't been a lot of population growth. I think change is absolutely what's going on. And all of us have to adapt to that. And that's been really, I think, one of the really large challenges for people on the council to get their mind around, and for the community to begin to figure out how they want to manage that change.
Yeah.
It's always hard.
What was it about Bainbridge that brought you and Wayne here?
Probably at the point we came, which was in 1977, the winter population was 6,000. So it was very, very different.
Quiet.
And then by the year 2000, there were 20,000 people year-round. So we came at a time and moved into a home that had been a summer home. So for us, there were lots of reasons to come. Primarily, it was a school system that was very solid, and one that we knew we would be able to watch our kids thrive. And happily, they did.
And they did. I can't imagine Bainbridge as a summer home location.
Is that right?
Yeah,
oh, that's interesting.
I can imagine it, sure, but to us, it's a large community.
Yeah, no, it
is.
But that's happened. That has happened within its 25 years of being a city. It's just so.
The school district, we know, is very strong. Many families seek to have their children in the Bainbridge School District. It's wonderful, diverse, strong, citizen supported,
yes,
taxpayer supported, a very, very, very good school district.
Yep.
Not only in academics, but in sports as well. Smart athletes.
I would love to say that, and I think there certainly are teams some years.
Yeah.
And then we play north and learn where the really good athletes live.
And let's talk about some challenges while you were on the city council. Shoreline master plan, master program.
We got to bring marijuana, figure out how to wander our way through brand new marijuana legislation and so forth, which was interesting. I mean, of all the things, if somebody'd said that's one of the things you're going to get to figure out.
Did you
never
in your wildest dream?
So that was fascinating. I mean, it really was. And it was also one of those very nice things because the community had so thoroughly voted during the statewide election on that particular question. Bainbridge, as a community, had voted so overwhelmingly in favor of it that we, as a council, had very little sense that we needed to wrangle yes or no. We didn't have to renegotiate that. I mean, there was certainly conversation about the wisest way to do it, and is this the best thing? But we knew what our community had already indicated mattered. So then it was a case of managing that change and thinking about how to do it. So as interesting as it was and challenging, it was more about problem solving. And of course that's fascinating when you're working with a group of people that are good minds and want to figure it out.
And this is my opportunity to say I have watched Ann Blair when she was serving for the city of Bainbridge Island on Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council. This is a regional council comprised of elected officials, tribal officials, naval officials. I think that covers it.
Yep.
Ann was always the voice of reason. Number one, she listens and listens extremely well. And then she asks you to clarify so she can understand. And what she's doing is speaking for the group. Please help us understand. I admired that, Ann, and BCAT covers, of course, the KRCC, Regional Coordinating Council. But to see you in action in your calm demeanor of really wanting to understand and having the person dig deep, tell us, keep telling us. What is it? I'm still not hearing it, but I just thought that is, to me, that is you.
Well, thank you very much. It's also the part that's really fun. I like the people, so it's nice to have.
How do you like everybody? Because there's people that are hard to deal with. How do you like everybody?
I don't know. It's not about, I mean, I did like the people that I was working with specifically at KRCC, but some of it is, whether I like them or not, I genuinely respect other people. And that makes caring about opinions a whole lot easier because I do respect, and I have yet to see somebody trying to make a mistake, and we don't go out of our way to figure out, how do we screw this up?
How are we
No, that is not where anybody starts from.
That is not what we want to do. I think the respect of other elected officials, because once you put your name out there, you are under the microscope, and people are going to look at your background and they are going to question you. So anyone that puts their name out to be on a ballot, you've got to give them some cred, because wow, taking that step to say, I want to serve and I want you to ask about my background and what was I doing here and there.
You know, it's interesting. I hear that, and I think as I've been watching this year with the national politics and so forth, it's so different, or at least it was for me, because this is my community. So it didn't particularly occur to me, as naive and somewhat appalling as it is, how thoroughly that's what I was doing. It was more like raising my hand to be a part of something that was going on and that I thought I had some skills to deal with, as opposed to, and I really didn't start, nor did I essentially develop an agenda, except to have it work and be able to work together. That's a really lucky place to be.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, makes it a whole lot easier at the far end.
Yes, it is. Let's talk a little bit more about the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council and really the power of that council.
Yes.
In our region. It is the council for all of Kitsap County.
It is. And I think the part, as much as that's going on, we're not making policy for anybody's jurisdiction,
Correct.
but rather collaborating. And the place that the power lies is in the partnership and the affiliation with Snohomish and King County and Pierce County. And that really is something that for Kitsap County means we get to work with the Puget Sound governments all around. And we are the smallest county in terms, and we have the larger geographic area, but it's a way of collectively then working on regional planning around transportation and land use. And the land use issues are very Kitsap centric, but I think in terms of the transportation and federal transportation dollars, it's that collaborative figuring it out together.
That's right.
And to be a part of that is a way of really magnifying what Kitsap County can do.
Our Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council sits at the table with Puget Sound Regional Coordinating Council, which is Josh Brown.
Right, isn't that, that's right.
Josh Brown left our county government to administer the Puget Sound Regional Council. They are in Seattle.
Yes.
So monthly, our representatives from Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council go to the table and sit with Snohomish, King, Pierce, and Kitsap. Those are the big dogs.
Yeah.
That's the I-5 corridor.
That's exactly right. That's right. And that's why it can, in fact, then bring to our area, our smaller part of that larger region, some additional federal money, and certainly coordinate. I mean, our highways do run all the way around.
That's right.
And so we end up doing a much more constructive and non-duplicative process. Yeah.
Huge, 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 huge. So Ann chose to leave government life at the end of 2015. Look at her smile, she's so happy. So when I approached Ann to do a program with BCAT and asked her, so Ann, what are you doing in retirement? She said, I'm not doing anything for a year. I'm not making any decisions. And I thought, wow, that's really smart. I'm gonna remember that. But she has made a decision. She's taken some vacation time. Her and Wayne have visited Colorado, family in Colorado, in the winter.
Yeah, absolutely. Even managed to get ourselves snowed in up in the mountains, so it was great.
How fun. So Ann, what is it you've been saying yes to, and what are you going to work on?
You know what, I mean, in terms of what I have said yes to is to helping Marina Wildsmith co-chair the Bainbridge Healthy Youth Alliance, which is at this point really in its formative stages of bringing together the nonprofit and government agencies with a specific interest in the promotion of healthy youth on our island. So that I had been working with that during my time on the council. And got
you formed a Mayor's Youth Council.
I did, yeah, and really, and that was wonderful, and gave me a chance to work with a group of young people, and heard how important it was to them to have a way to be involved in the community and have the community understand what was going on in a very direct, hands-on way with the young people, not just at the high school, but middle school and the elementary schools too. So I've said I would help with that alliance process. How could I walk away from that and something, well, from the kids for sure, and from that commitment to the fact that that is, for all of our communities, those are our leaders coming up.
Amen. And as we continue to fill volunteer slots, be it on the Planning Commission, Parks District Commission, other commissions that the city has.
Our city has a lot of citizen advisory committees, which makes a big difference.
We need young people at the table.
We do.
We need young families at the table.
Yeah. And it makes a difference if people have had a chance to work on city issues or think about them. And one of the things we did with the Mayor's Youth Council was we're doing the comprehensive plan, the update here on Bainbridge, as we are all around the state. But we've also involved the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council on some of those questions and figured out ways, and they're going to come and make presentations to the Planning Commission and to the City Council about how to make sure that the youth perspective is incorporated into our comp plan. So we're lucky.
Very lucky. What are other issues that are coming up for Bainbridge, and what do you see as important things that are happening not only in Kitsap, but specifically Bainbridge?
You know, I think that it is what we started this conversation with, and it's the growth management question. Not so much whether we're going to grow, but how do we do it in a way that continues to hold and respect the values that this community establishes for itself. And that's true in every community. But it's land use questions. How do we make it comfortable? How do we retain some of the different qualities of life and the environment that matters so much to all of us that have chosen to live here or get to? And the other one, related because it's so intertwined, is transportation. And so I think that between land use and transportation, so it's the planning that we're going to do and are doing through the comprehensive plan update. But those are really so fundamental. And tucked again into each of those are questions about environmental sustainability, economic development, sustainability in the economic realm. And again, how do we do that in a way that fits what we've said matters to Bainbridge? So there's a lot of work coming. And with the transportation, we've got Highway 305, which really is that corridor into the rest of Kitsap County.
The rest of Kitsap, absolutely. And the ferries.
Well, yes, I was just going to say, oh, yes.
And the ferry, which takes us off Bainbridge over to King County, which takes us out of Bremerton over to King County.
Which again comes back to that whole need to look at things in a regional kind of way and think about it.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed our time with Ann Blair today. I certainly have.
It's always fun to think about the community and the island, as well as certainly Kitsap County, which matters a lot.
I know, and it's special to you. Thanks so much for your time today, Ann. It was so great talking to you, and also helping, just getting prepared to have our conversation today. I've really enjoyed it and look forward to it.
Thank you. I've loved being here. I appreciate your interest.
Thanks for joining us on Conversation With. We'll see you next time.